All right, so this is the first video we have here on building the choruses. And this video, it's going to be similar to what we did for you on the verses. We're going to talk about kind of why we made some of the decisions that we did when producing the chorus on Don't Drop Me Now, as well as show you a couple little tricks and little key elements that we think are interesting to show you. And then in the second video for the chorus, we're going to go more into some structure and vocal arrangement things. So Christian, why don't you go ahead and play them the chorus here. We'll check it out.
Don't drop me now. Don't drop me now. Don't drop me now. Don't drop me now. Even though the
So there you have it. So in the chorus, we essentially have a big layer of synths. That's where a lot of the sound's coming from. The piano is kept in there, also from the verse. That stayed in. Acoustic guitar. Still got the acoustic guitar strumming, which, again, we cover in the acoustic guitar video, so we're not going to talk about that in this one. There's added background vocals, so that's obviously different from the chorus. Sub bass, so we have our bass come in on the chorus. If you notice, there were no bass. There was no bass on the verses. And then we got our program drums and percussion. So, Christian, talk a little bit about kind of what you were going for when producing the chorus versus the verses of the song, the contrast there.
Yeah, so the thing with this song, it's not this huge complex instrumental. We're really just here trying to support the vocal. So the song opens up spectrum-wise, like frequency-wise, and also width-wise with all the synths coming in. We have the bass coming in that there's no bass in the verses, like Daniel said. And we're really just trying to fill up space and make this kind of cool atmosphere that you can kind of just get lost into. The verses, he's, talking about the story of the song and all leading up to this Don't Drop Me Now line. And I want to make something that you kind of just dive into and get lost in that line and just get lost in all the layers that we have in the synths, which we'll show you here in a sec.
I think the Don't Drop Me Now line is like a kind of a big, cry for help. Mm-hmm. So the music just had to get more and more intense there. So we kept the kind of soundscape ambient vibe that was in the verse, but just made it a little bit more intense. So a lot of that was done with the synth. So let's hop into that. We'll start with showing you guys how we layer these synths to make them sound like this big wall of sound. So let's take a look at the synths here. One of the big things that we do often to get large sound in our productions is a lot of synth layering, and it isn't sort of just choosing random patches and putting a bunch in there, although we used to do that. We were guilty of that when we first started. It is about creating something intentional, and I almost think of the synths, the big synth stack here is the EQ spectrum. So you have kind of lower stuff and just different layers playing different roles. So Christian, why don't you just solo all the synths for me to check out? Cool. So we've kind of color coded it here for you. We're going to break down each stack and sort of the role that it fills, and solo it for you so you can kind of hear it. And then Christian will go into a little bit more detail about some of the cool things he did that are specific to this song to make it kind of flowy throughout the chorus. So Christian, what's kind of the first part down there in the pink?
Cool. So in the pink we have these two pretty abrasive saw synth sounds that they're kind of the foundation for this entire synth stack. It kind of connects the synths to that sub bass that we have going on, which I'll show you. So it's just low single notes, the root notes of the chords that again just kind of anchor the sound. It, even though it's not the main sound you hear, because as we'll play them for you, they're pretty saw like abrasive sounds. But it just helps the ear again connect to the notes and fill that space that it's not intentional, or it's not, you don't hear it necessarily in the synth stack, but it helps fill out a lot of space.
It's almost like where like distorted guitars,
Right,
would
exactly.
be. It connects the high end to the
Yes.
to the low end of it. So yeah, why don't you play that for them there? Yes, again, these are just big kind of single note. We haven't not gotten to the chords yet. Just kind of distorted. One's sort of a brass sound and one's a saw sound. So those are kind of good starting points. And I want to mention that we're trying to do this without being super specific to like, what kind of software synth, or we happen to use some outboard synths from Dave Smith Instruments, but that stuff's not important. This is more about how the different sounds kind of play into the part and stack together to make this big wall of sound. So pay more attention to that and less of the, what actual synths that we used, because everybody's going to have different ones that they like. So that's kind of the first step there, is having that anchor down at the bottom, big single note saw and brass. So what's the kind of next layer that you have?
So in this blue color here, there's the main kind of chords. This is the meat of the sound. Like, this is what the ear should be hearing, and kind of creates this atmosphere. And the piano is also included in that. So I'm just going to quickly play all those for you.
So these are the main chords
Yeah.
of the song. So now, since there's only 2 chords, right, in
Right.
this chorus, so talk through some of the stuff that you did in here to make them interesting. So if you just take like, we usually take 3 to 5 different, kind of chord parts in this, not different parts, but different sounds rather, to play the chords. If you just are doing all the chords, it can sound static. So there's a couple of things, what do you do to like make sure it just
Right.
doesn't sound static?
Yeah. So like Daniel was saying, it's only 2 chords. It's 4 to 1 of the key of the song. So first I kept this piano and the swell synth that is in the verses in the choruses. So this is kind of like our anchor. This is where I started. And that sounds like this. So same exact thing you remember from the verse that we got going on. So then I'll start with kind of this high space synth that it's only a single note 2. It's kind of in the upper register of the chords, that it helps the ear latch onto the chord, and it creates this nice little counter melody that moves with the chords. I'll play it soloed. I also like the white noise mixed in there. It just kind of takes up space in that upper range that is nice. It doesn't, conflict with the vocal that's going to be sitting up around there, but it helps the synths kind of fill in space there. So
something kind of airy.
yes,
To start with.
yeah, especially in something like this, we're going for atmosphere. So that sounds like this with the piano. Cool, so easy enough. We have kind of our anchor, and then that high space synth. So these 3 in the middle are kind of interesting because I played with the attack and release times of the synth that I was using to kind of create this ambience with the synths where you'll hear each of them kind of hit at different times. They swell in at different times. That creates that atmosphere.
It's like the movement going on.
Yeah, that creates movement because, again, we only have 2 chords here. So as well as, arranging the chords on the piano nice, this is a way to make them sound flowy and not just kind of stale, like, oh, back to the same chords. So first I'll show you this polychorus synth that has a little bit of attack on it, so it swells in and then kind of sustains and helps, create, again, kind of like the main meat of the sound that you're hearing and takes up space.
I think it would be cool to sort of play it to the piano. So the piano, guys, is the first initial hits, and essentially what Christian's done is set the attack times differently so that they swell in differently, kind of against that main attack. So maybe that'll give some contrast.
So I have the piano soloed, and here's that polychorus synth with the piano. And here I'll play it with the swell synth and high space. So this is all we've talked about so far. So pretty cool. So this Poly 2 synth has a super long attack time, so you're not going to hear it in the beginning, but as the chord progresses in that bar, you're going to hear it swell in under where the piano and that swell synth, the decay is falling off. This Poly 2 synth is going to come up and creates this new timbre that kind of swells in, so it's really interesting to the ear. So I'll play it soloed, and then I'll play it with everything. Here it is with everything else that we've talked about. So really cool. So you can hear we've got these other layers. They're not layering on top of each other. I'm not creating mud here. I'm creating space and movement with the part with only 2 chords. This is literally just a chord that hits on the one of every measure that I'm creating movement by layering these synths.
Yeah, so I think that's how you can get kind of big sound without it being, these huge chords. It's more about the movement, and really on this, really the only things are setting different attack times. So you have your whatever your main attack is, and then having those different chord layers sort of swell in and out at different times.
Right. And then there's one more in this layer, which is I've labeled the 7th chord synth. So this one's kind of cool. It has this random LFO generator that is set to the octave of the notes. So you'll hear it kind of jump around randomly to, I think, like 3 or 4 different octaves of the chord. So this is, a little more intense part than the rest of the synths, but it, again, creates this movement, and it's a really nice part, and I thought it was a really cool sounding synth, so listen to that solo. So it's kind of swelling in and out, and you're getting those different octaves that pop out at different spots, which is really cool.
So you can have a weird one in there, basically.
Yeah.
That's your one weird one.
So let's listen to all these chord synths that I have so far. And then keep in mind these saw anchors that we're talking about. So this is the chords with those saws. Yeah, the saws you'll hear sit under that really nicely, because if I was trying to get, these kind of softer sounding like square and sine wave synths to punch through at the level or the octave that the saws are, you wouldn't be able to hear it. You'll need to turn it up so loud, and then your mix is going to get muddy because you're going to have to increase the volume so much to even hear it that it's,
right.
That's not smart arranging. So that's the purpose of these saws, to kind of add almost like context of where these are sitting, where you're not necessarily supposed to hear them and be like, oh, listen to that huge saw sound. It just kind of adds that lower end and fills in that space that these ones aren't filling out because I don't want them to. I want you to kind of hear the ambience and texture of these parts and hear the notes of the chords while, again, this anchors it in the track.
Yeah, one patch is not going to do
Right.
all the. I think a lot of folks are just trying to design this,
Ultimate
one
patch,
big,
yeah.
the ultimate patch, and maybe it could be done for certain things, but it's, again, this isn't sort of random. It's about having intentional pieces here. So that's kind of the step one and step two. We have kind of the low saw, the sort of anchor stuff. Then we have the primary chord stuff. And then let's talk about step three when we're building our kind of synth wall of sound, if you will. And that's more of the movement items. Yes. So, ARPs, we have a
sequencers
part, sequenced parts.
Yes.
And one thing I'll say with this too is, depending on the song, depends on how much of these movement. It's easy to make these movement parts a sort of key part, and that may or may not be a good thing. So when if you're doing some movement parts, some arpeggiated things, you got to kind of decide, is this going to be something that sticks out or not? Because it's easy to make one and get excited about it, and then it sort of takes over the vocal. That's like the main part. So in this case, our lead vocal is the main thing. So this is just purely to add some movement. Why don't we play it and then get a better idea of the parts?
So there's two here. There's this one labeled ARP, which sounds like this. So that's just kind of a, classic arpeggiated synth on the same chords that we're doing. And then there's also this one labeled Boops, which is the same one that comes in the second chorus. It's just
second verse.
Verse, I'm sorry. That, again, is kind of just that punchy dotted eighth note synth hit. So the idea behind these is to just add movement to the chorus. Again, momentum, because the verse, you're hearing those two chords, there's a bunch of reverb, it sounds cool and big, but we need this chorus to pick up, to sound faster without actually being faster. So how do you do that? You subdivide parts and add parts that happen faster, like these arpeggiator synths that make more interest for the ear to latch onto. So I'll play them together. And then I'll play it with everything else in the synth bus we have so far, and just kind of listen to, now that you've kind of heard all the layers separately, listen to how each one comes in and each one kind of does its role and sits where
I would play the green ones there, the step three stuff, the ARPs, take those out and add them in. Yeah, you can hear a big difference. Like you have your soundscape, and then all of a sudden now there's drive. Yeah. Kind of tames some of the atmosphere. Without it, it's starts to get tiny.
It focuses.
Focuses it. Yeah. So what's the last thing you got, Christian? There, step 4 is.
Just this little bell lead. Nothing, too crazy. It's just there's that one line vocal that comes in, and I wanted just this little counter melody to it. When you listen to it. It's not on top of the vocal, it's right after the vocal, and adds almost this tail end. Think about it, you're kind of adding to that vocal phrase and embellishing it, not trying to sit on top of it, not trying to be like, oh, listen to this cool melody. We have our melody, we have the Don't Drop Me Now, that's what you're supposed to be focusing on. So here it is soloed. So just a really simple bell part, sounds like it's in some huge space, which adds to the ambience of the song.
Yeah, so your step 4, guys, is if needed, you don't always have to do this. In this particular song we did, is the lead synth part. So depending on the vibe of the song, obviously this song's kind of more moody and not too not too over the top. Maybe you do have a more intense, sort of synth lead part. But yeah, so that's kind of it. Just to recap there. So step one, we had our down here in the pink, we have that big brass and saw single notes. That's our anchor tying the high, kind of the high end of the spectrum to the low kind of sub bass. Then we have the chord stuff there in blue, where Christian talked about setting the attack times a little differently to dance around the impact that the piano has. Then we have our kind of driving parts, our movement, our momentum with the arps there and the dotted eighth note kind of dun, dun, dun part. And then the last is the bell lead, so your lead synth part, which in this song just is simply a decoration for the vocal. They go back and forth. So why don't we play one more time the whole thing, so they can especially hear the paying attention to the vocal and the lead synth and how they go back and forth.
Don't try me now. Don't try me now. Don't try me now. Don't try me now.
Cool. So the last thing that I wanted you to sort of mention and bring up was automating the filters. Mm-hmm. So one thing, if you notice on some of these chord synths, you have kind of the filter low, and it kind of opens up towards the end of the part, right. And that's just another way to give it kind of
movement and
spice.
It's not really something, it's not almost like an EDM drop where in the beginning everything's super filtered and then by the end you end up with this huge sound. This is just subtle movements. It's that helps the chorus grow. The best example of it is on this ARP synth. So I just simply took the cut off and started it at a lower frequency, and then by the end of the chorus had it open up a little bit more, so the sound kind of evolves over the chorus, which creates dimension. So at the start, it sounds like this.
And end, yeah.
So it's cool, it's going, and then I'll loop it back to the beginning after this, but here it opened up at the end, and then I'll loop back and hear how small it is at the beginning compared to this. Especially at the end there, it opens up with the white noise that's included in the patch. But it's just an easy way, like small movement, to make the chorus sounds like it grows, where the listener isn't really going to realize that, but it's going to sound bigger at the end instead of, that chorus repeats twice, so it's not just a simple repeat, the instruments and parts grow in intensity.
Yeah, not like an EDM thing, but just nice and subtle. So why don't you pull up a filter? So obviously we played this on our outboard synths, and we're kind of doing this as we were printing the track, but it's super easy, and pretty much any DAW you have, grab a filter. We'll pull up Fab Filter Micro.
Yeah.
Just a pretty basic example.
So I threw it on this polychorus synth right here, and we don't need that big of a peak, but I'll just exaggerate it and start it super low, and again, you'll just automate this frequency to go up as the part progresses.
Yeah. So you start where it's still audible,
Yeah.
And then it's
exaggerated it there, but.
So yeah, that's pretty simple, guys. You can start doing that if you're not already doing that. That may be simple for some of you, but for those of you that didn't know that, that's going to make a huge difference, just having all these little subtle movements. So that's how you get it. That's how you get that big kind of wall of sound, with your synths there and layer. And remember, check out the little checklist thing we have if you need to refer to that when you're producing tracks. So let's move on. There's a couple cool things going on in the drums that I want you to take a look at. So let's dive into that. So let's take a look at the drums here for the chorus on Don't Drop Me Now. Similar to the verse, they're all programmed, kind of sample and loop stuff, no live drums. Christian, why don't you play it, and then we're going to pull out some, kind of show you some key highlights and cool little tricks that we did in here. So. Cool. So, as far as rhythm goes, it doesn't go too
Right.
180 from the verses. Obviously, it's slightly different. A lot of they were the same samples that we used from the verses. Now, we did add a couple of extra layers here for the chorus. We had talked about kind of the ballad thing, the ballad beat sort of inspiring the drum beat that we program in the verses, but using kind of big snares just wouldn't sort of cut it on the verse. It would sound a little cheesy. But in the chorus here, since we added a bunch more elements, we did want to stack a couple of different sounds. So we stacked another kick that's a little bigger in size, and then a snare that's bigger in size. If you remember, the sample layer that was the snare sample layer that was in the verses was pretty much a side stick. Yeah. So that's still there. We just wanted to add kind of more of a shotgun snare. So Christian, why don't you show them the new samples that you added?
Yeah. So here's the snare. It's pretty simple. A big, high velocity snare with reverb on it, and this is a kick I really like to use from a That Sound Pack Elements, I believe it's called. That's just this really punchy kick with a lot of room sound too. So that's kind of getting some ambience that I like. So this is all just the kick and snare that I have together for the chorus. So just big, powerful, super easy part.
That's pretty common for us. Like, we'll use a lot of the same, layers from the verses, and we're just going to stack a little bit more on there so that can cut through the sound. So simple things there. You may already be doing that, but that's definitely an important change that happened from the verse drums and the chorus drums. Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at another thing that we talked about a little bit in the verse video, adding kind of loops behind the program. Since we do this kick and snare stuff to the grid, you can add the shaker and tambourine, some hi-hat loops, but we had talked about using sort of real drum breaks and loops too to add feel behind our programmed drum beat. So why don't we take a listen to some of those that you've added. Perhaps we can do kind of a before and after, and then break it down and show you the different layers of loops we're using behind the beat.
Yeah, so let's do that. So I'm going to play the drum bus as it is, and then I'm going to take out those loops that Daniel was just talking about.
Yeah, so you can hear where a lot of the momentum and kind of interest is happening, and this is in those loops. So why don't we talk about how we got those and kind of break down each one. So there's 3 of them going on, and they all have different roles. And why don't we turn them up a little bit so they can hear them? Yeah,
I'll kind of highlight each one. So these were all like 4 and 8 bar loops, but I wasn't just gonna throw a bunch of random drum beats in there. I wanted it to match the kick and snare that I already had in there. So again, the same thing like I did with the hi-hat loop in the verse. I just chopped it up. I took what I wanted from each each little loop and pasted, you know, the kicks in the right place and the snares in the right place, so I had the rhythm that I wanted. So it's
Can you pull out one so they can see what you're talking about? Show them the original loop.
yeah.
Yeah. So this was a pre-made loop, guys. And that doesn't mean you have to use it that way. You know,
Exactly.
you can take out little parts and still have the nuance of the player.
Yeah, so
that's something that matches.
Yeah. So as you can see, compared to this chorus loop 1, it's way different. So there's a little fill in there, and I just went ahead and chopped it up to, you know, fit the beat that I already had, and it sounds like this. I'll turn it up. So there's a little extra processing going on. There's pumping from the LFO tool that, you know, just kind of, again, adds movement, helps it stick out on the and of every beat.
So the LFO tool, I don't think we've talked about that yet. In this particular course, essentially is a tool that's an automatic side chain, so it's a consistent kind of rhythm,
which you
pattern.
can set to whatever
Yeah, which you can adjust
set rate.
instead of doing your normal, you know, sending some kind of trigger element to a compressor and doing it that way. Although in a second here we're going to show you why that way you may want to do it. You may want to do it that way instead of using the LFO tool.
Yeah.
But the LFO tool is just quick and easy, throw it on. So it just kind of is making it pump. Is that right?
Yep. And then I didn't, you know, want this huge loop in the, you know, the kind of front of the mix, so I tucked it away by pitching it down an octave. And there's just kind of that cool, like, shaker sound that I thought would be nice to help the rhythm move on the end of every beat, like I said. So that's kind of what I took from that loop. That's why that's in there.
You want to show the before and after with the processing?
Yeah.
So this is dry. Yeah, so consistent theme on a lot of our loops. A lot of times we're either pitching them down, filtering them out, and that's because they're not supposed to be these upfront parts. That's gonna start getting really jumbled very quickly. They're just to make these layers. So
Yeah.
that's the first one.
So this chorus loop 2, I just really like the ride sound in it. I thought it would be really cool in the track, kind of, I don't know, almost set the mood of the drum track and, you know, make it not sound like programmed drums of like soloed kicks and snares, but make it sound like it's in a space. So I'll solo that for you. So it's just cool, kind of vintagey ride, which I played to here by, again, pitching it down by 8 semitones, and then also using this cool free plugin, I believe, from Isotope called Vinyl. So this just basically degrades the sound quality like it was on vinyl record, and there's a bunch of different settings you can mess with. It's really cool. I'll turn both of those off so you can hear how the loop sounded before. Process.
Yeah, I like how the vinyl plugin affects the ride, makes it definitely have a cool tonality to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then what, you got some compression on it?
Yeah, this is sidechain to the
right. So here's the difference, guys. When you're using the LFO tool, it's this, you know, consistent pattern that you set in the LFO tool versus doing it kind of the way you may be used to, where you send perhaps your kick drum to a bus, and then the bus is the side chain for this compressor to make it pump. Now you're doing it only on the hits of the kick drum.
Yes.
So it isn't this consistent pattern necessarily. It's just whenever the kick drum's happening. So why are some loops, Christian, on the LFO where it has the consistent, and then some loops you're doing it to where it's just opening up with the kick?
Right. Yeah. So it's just two different vibes I was going for with this first chorus loop. Like I was saying, there's kind of that little shaker sound, and I want that on the and of every beat, but the kick doesn't hit that way. But the LFO tool I can set that way, so you just hear it peak out.
Gotcha. Right.
Where this one, I wanted it kind of swell up with the kicks. That a lot of the synths are also sidechained the same exact way, so it's kind of part of that noise that swells in. So the kick hits really big and hard, and then all those synths, fill up the space after it. So that's where I wanted this loop to sit. So that's why I used this instead.
Cool. So play them. That was the ride loop. So the ride. Okay,
Yeah.
so they kind of tuck back when the kick's happening,
Yeah,
and then kind
exactly.
of push out. Cool. And then there's a third one there.
Yeah, this one's purely just a live drummer feel. As you can see, I didn't really chop it up that much. Just fit really well. I like the hi-hat pattern, so it kind of adds a human element to my loop. And I just took the Logic EQ and filtered it so it sat in the track where I wanted it to sit, and that's it.
Yeah, rolled off some of the highs and some of the lows, and see the compressor on there. Is that one also being side chained?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
this one's being side chained to the kick.
Yeah.
Similar to chorus loop too. So that's cool. So the first loop has the LFO tool because that's what was that, the hat
Yeah, there's like a little shaker.
or
sound.
shaker?
Could be
Yeah.
an idea.
So that has the consistent thing, and then the second two, the 2 and 3, chorus loop 2 and 3 are side chained to the kick, so that they're only kind of being tucked away when the kick
Yeah.
happens, along with the synth. So that's something that we did leave out when we were talking about the synths. The synths are also set up that way, and the big synth layer that we showed you, all those are being
Yeah,
side
side
chained
chained.
to the kick pattern. So cool. So those are the chorus loops. Another neat thing, and I guess I'll mention that's on top of guys having a couple of hat things and
Yeah.
shaker
Simple
things.
hat
So,
loops, not anything
yeah,
crazy.
I mean that's how you're gonna build these drum tracks. Like you can't just have like one little
Hi-hat,
hat thing
kick
and then like a
snare.
kick snare. It's not gonna have the vibe. Not for a track like this. You're almost creating a little bit of mush, but in a good way.
Yeah.
So another cool trick that I noticed was sort of the main big verb clap that happens. Why don't you solo that? We'll talk about what you did.
Cool. So
Yeah. So what's going on there?
So obviously the start of it is on the 4 before the chorus hits, and so if you listen to the tail, I have the LFO tool on it, which is why you're hearing the pumping, set to quarter notes. Simple enough, but if I put that on the initial hit, then I wouldn't get that big clap effect that I want. So easy enough. It's the same exact sample as you can see here. If I drag it out, I just pasted it to a new track that has the LFO tool on. Well, the initial kind of hit doesn't. So you get this huge clap, fills up the space, and then as soon as the chorus comes in, it would sound weird if I took it out, but it just goes back into the mix, side chained, so it fits with everything else, but I still get that huge attack that I want.
Yeah, so if you have a big sample, guys, a big clap or big snare or something, it's just a way to add some interest. And all you did was, Christian, you just cut the decay.
Yeah,
You
cut
split
where
it,
I wanted
I guess,
and
and-
just copied it to a new track.
Yeah, because this is all one sample.
Yeah.
It's all one sample. You just snipped it right, at the attack, and then the tail, and process the tail
Yes,
with the side
exactly.
chain. So it's a cool way to kind of spice up some big hits in your in your productions if you have big long samples. So I think that's pretty much the couple little things we wanted to show you with the drums. A couple of key points there. Let's dive into how we made the sub bass. All right, so the last thing I want to kind of go over with you here is the sub bass part. So again, there's no bass in the verses. The low end really comes in and hits on the chorus, and we did that on purpose so that, again, the chorus would hit harder. And the bass on this chorus is just a sub bass. There isn't any guitar bass or, bass really like, riff or anything like that. And we did that essentially just so there was low end, but it isn't really like kind of a noticeable part or anything. Couple ways to make it. Usually when we're making sub bass, there's a lot of 808 packs that we like. Obviously 808s, they have a little bit of an impact usually, and then a lot of subs, so works nicely for this. And there are a couple of different instruments. We usually just grab packs that have 808 samples that are essentially the entire range of notes, and do it by hand. So we just know the notes of the thing, the thing being the chorus, and drag it in and make the part. So Woodshed has an 808 pack, Woodshed Audio. What are these?
This is by Producer's Choice, yeah.
Is this the 808 Warfare?
No.
It's a different thing, okay.
That's a contact instrument. This is just their samples.
Yeah, so a lot of places you can get them. So this is how we do the sub bass, and what the main thing with the sub bass that we want to show you is most people are going to be listening on earbuds and laptop speakers and things like that. So how do we get some of that low end to shine through and have effect on low quality small speakers that most people unfortunately listen to their music on, but it is what it is, so we have to do what we can to make sure they still get a listening experience. So Christian, why don't you talk a little bit about the processing of the 808s?
Cool. So let's just concentrate on this first 808 track right here. I'm going to take all the processing off for a bit, and I'll turn it up just for the sake of you guys hearing it.
Yeah, you want to have headphones for this, guys.
So it's unprocessed.
Well, actually, if we did our job, you should be able to hear it on some laptop speakers, but to really hear the difference, go ahead and use headphones.
So just big subby 808. So that's not going to really show up in all the places I want it to. So first, there's this Vertigo VSM, actually a mastering distortion unit. This one's made by Plugin Alliance. UAD also makes one. That's the same thing. So this adds distortion. As you can see, there's kind of two different units here for the second harmonic and third harmonic. That you can blend in, and you drive each one, and it creates these upper harmonics that you can hear on smaller speakers. So I'm going to turn that on and let you listen to it. So already you're getting some drive, you're getting some longer sustain of the notes because of the distortion that's adding.
Yeah, so in general, again, you don't have to use this exact plugin.
Yeah.
We're showing you, the exact way we made this song, so that's why we talk about it. But in general, if you're having trouble with your 808s or any sub bass, rather, kind of cutting through on smaller speakers, distortion. So whether it's Decapitator or something that's in your DAW, a bit crunch or whatever, experiment with distorting. And a lot of times, this one isn't really an example of it, but we have some songs where it's very distorted. Like you don't really think it is, but it is. So cool. So distortion step one. What else you got on there?
So there's this precision enhancer by UAD. So this is purely just adding harmonics. So you can set your kind of bass frequency here, and then this is kind of like a mix knob of how much you wanted the effects, and then there's different modes. I'm not going to go too far into how it works. But again, it's just adding those upper harmonics. This isn't necessarily distortion. This is just kind of extra sound that's going to allow smaller speakers to reproduce the sound that this 808 is, creating, and you'll perceive it as really low, but keep in mind this is adding the upper harmonics of the original note. So that sounds like this. So it's a really cool plugin. It's pretty unique, and I love using it a lot because it lets me have those 808s or any kind of bass instrument stand out on smaller speakers.
There's a couple of I'm just trying to give alternatives here if you don't have UAD. So the Oxford Inflator, I think, does kind of a similar thing. Isn't necessarily a cheap plugin, but it's if you don't have the UAD kind of setup, it's a cheaper way technically. Then there's I believe it's a Voice of God. Is that UAD?
Yeah,
or is
that's
that
UAD.
Okay, that is UAD.
Yeah.
So So yeah, there's a couple of options out there that aren't UAD. But yeah, so then what you got last year?
Yeah, so I added a bunch of those transients by, the distortion and those extra harmonics. So I'm just kind of taming it all together by limiting it with 3A. And just kind of helps glue everything together, make sure no the tacks of some of the notes stick out. So that left me with this. And again, that adds to the note length a little bit because I'm, doing a generous amount of compression, so it's just evening it out. So even though we're kind of using a pretty heavy attack sample, it's allowing that bass to sustain over the entire length of that sample.
Yeah. So at this point, now you got something that's starting to cut through smaller speakers. And then what's the second track you got there? The 808 wide.
Yeah. So this has all the same processing that we talked about. Same exact part. I just copied it down. You could do this on a bus, sending it to a bus right here of the main 808, but I don't know. I just am OCD and like to see everything that's going on. So same exact processing, same exact part. I just added this UAD, the roll and dimension D. So this is really, really cool on basses. It's going to add width. And so there's no mix knob, so that's why you may not want to put it on directly on your 808 or main bass track, but you mix it in a small amount, and it's crazy how much wider your bass sounds. And it's not even, about creating this huge, subby thing below your mix. It just really helps fill out the low end in all the right places.
I think since there's no bass in the verse, when the bass comes in, and then the fact that it's wide, that really, really adds to the contrast of the verses happening and then the chorus. So the chorus is growing this way and this way.
Yeah, and in some songs, not this one, where I do have like an 808 like this in the verse, I'll keep the 808 wide track out and then only add it in the chorus. And even though it'll be the same volume, hitting just as hard with the same processing, it's all of a sudden like wider and just bigger sounding in the low end, so it really helps. So I'm going to turn it off, and then I'm going to kick it in and let you hear what it's adding. So it's really cool, really wide.
Maybe show the dry one there. And then add in the wide track. Yeah. So this is the first 808 sub bass, and then we'll add in the wide one kind of a little bit in. Yeah. Big difference. That's cool.
Yeah.
So that pretty much. Let me give you some alternatives on the. You're looking at probably the Roland Dimension D. Like, that's just a great choice that we like to use again in the UAD line. Pretty much any imager plugin. So Waves has one.
Isotope.
Isotope has one.
If you like the Valhalla stuff, the Uber mod, I think they have some doubling preset. You want to be careful because you don't want it to start phasing with the bass. But I think there's a preset or two that you can have the same effect.
The Valhalla stuff's cheap. It's probably $50 or something.
I think it is.
And then sometimes the DAWs have one built in, so Logic has a wider, not our favorite sounding one. But yeah, so there are some other options. We just dig the Roland Dimension D. So that pretty much wraps up the first video, the chorus. And the second video, we're going to talk about some of the vocal arrangement stuff going on, which is going to be cool, and discuss how we make each chorus grow, kind of in the grand scheme of things, for the entire song. So let's dive into that next.